The Nazi regime obsessively preached racial purity, clean living, and the absolute ban of alcohol and narcotics. Yet the entire German invasion of France was fueled by a lab-made chemical that modern medicine classifies as crystal meth. Here is the untold story of how a pharmaceutical experiment built the Blitzkrieg, and how the chemical debt broke the German army's mind. In the spring of 1940, Allied commanders in Paris and London were confident in their defensive strategy. The dense mountainous Ardennes forest was considered impassable for modern armor. Even if German tanks somehow maneuvered through the trees, military doctrine dictated that advancing armies required rest. Human endurance had a biological limit. A soldier needed sleep, fuel needed replenishment, and supply lines needed time to catch up. But what emerged from the Ardennes in May 1940 defied every known calculation of human physiology. General Heinz Guderian's panzer divisions did not stop. They drove day and night, relentlessly pushing through France without halting for 72 consecutive hours. French defenders, exhausted and disoriented, woke up at midnight to find German tanks already rolling through their town squares. The speed of the invasion was so incomprehensible that the press named it the Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. But behind the myth of the invincible, racially superior German soldier lay a closely guarded industrial secret. The Blitzkrieg was not fueled by willpower or Nazi ideology. It was fueled by a small, white tablet stamped with the word Pervitin. The story began 3 years earlier in a pristine Berlin laboratory at the Temmler Pharmaceutical Company. Chief chemist Dr. Fritz Hauschild had been obsessed with the American stimulant Benzedrine, which had been used commercially since the mid-1930s. Seeking a more potent German equivalent, Hauschild synthesized a compound known chemically as methamphetamine hydrochloride. When Temmler patented Pervitin in 1937, it was marketed not as a weapon of war, but as a miracle consumer drug. German newspapers advertised it as a Wachhaltemittel, an alertness booster. It was sold over the counter in pharmacies without a prescription. Students took it to study for exams, shift workers took it to work double shifts. There were even boxed chocolates dosed with methamphetamine, Hildebrands Pralinen, advertised to housewives with the promise that 2 chocolates would replace a full night of sleep and make household chores feel effortless. But Dr. Otto Ranke, director of the Research Institute for General and Defense Physiology, saw a far darker potential. To Ranke, the greatest enemy of the German military was not the French or British infantry. It was fatigue. In 1939, Ranke conducted secret medical trials on university students, testing their math and motor skills while exhausted. The results were staggering. Under the influence of Pervitin, fatigue vanished. Hunger disappeared. Fear and risk aversion plummeted, replaced by an artificial, euphoric self-confidence. Ahead of the Western Offensive in 1940, the Wehrmacht's High Command issued a decree known as the Stimulant Decree. Over the course of just 3 months, from April to July 1940, the German army ordered more than 35 million Pervitin tablets from Temmler Werk. Medical officers at the front lines were issued clear, printed instructions. Give 1 tablet to soldiers to prevent sleep, 2 tablets for intense combat stress, and more as needed to maintain forward momentum. When the invasion of France began, the chemical effect was terrifyingly effective. German soldiers marched up to 40 miles a day, their pupils dilated, their hearts hammering at 120 beats per minute. In his memoirs, General Guderian recalled his order to his men: "I demand that you do not sleep for at least 3 days and nights." They obeyed because they chemically couldn't close their eyes. Allied prisoners later spoke with chilling awe about German infantrymen who seemed immune to shock, firing their weapons with eerie, mechanical aggression long after ordinary soldiers would have collapsed. But the human brain cannot be cheated forever. Biology always demands repayment, and the chemical debt of the Blitzkrieg was devastating. By the autumn of 1940, as the euphoria of the French surrender faded, German military hospitals began overflowing with a new kind of casualty. It wasn't shrapnel or bullet wounds, it was psychological collapse. The German chief of civilian health, Leonardo Conti, sounded a desperate alarm. Soldiers were experiencing severe psychotic episodes. After 72 hours of chemical wakefulness, men suffered from intense paranoia, auditory hallucinations, and heart failure. On quiet nights in occupied France, entire platoons opened fire on empty fields, screaming at imaginary enemies lurking in the shadows. The come-down brought crushing depression, lethargy, and an uncontrollable physical craving for more of the drug. Despite Conti's attempts to restrict Pervitin and classify it as a regulated substance under the Reich opium law, the military machine was already hooked. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, in June 1941, Pervitin was no longer a weapon of high-speed victory. It became a desperate tool for survival. On the frozen steppes of the Eastern Front, where temperatures dropped to 40 below zero, soldiers used Pervitin to fight off the numbness of frostbite and the psychological terror of Soviet artillery. In the German archives, thousands of preserved letters home reveal the true scale of the addiction. A young soldier stationed in Poland, Heinrich Böll, who would survive the war and win the Nobel Prize in Literature, wrote repeatedly to his parents with the same frantic request, "It is tough out here. Please send me some Pervitin as soon as you can." In another letter, he wrote, "I'm exhausted. Just send pills." The letters weren't written by ideological warriors. They were written by shivering, chemically dependent teenagers trying to manipulate their own nervous systems just to make it through the night. The rot at the bottom of the Wehrmacht was a direct reflection of the rot at the very top. While Nazi propaganda broadcast images of Adolf Hitler as a pure, ascetic vegetarian who never touched alcohol or coffee, the dictator was himself descending into profound chemical dependency. His personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, turned the Führer's veins into a walking laboratory. By 1943, Hitler was receiving daily intravenous injections of a staggering drug cocktail, including Eucadol, a synthetic opiate nearly twice as potent as morphine, combined with heavy doses of methamphetamine and cocaine. The trembling hands, paranoid outbursts, and irrational military commands that defined Hitler's final years in the Führer bunker were not just symptoms of a losing war. They were the classic clinical stages of end-stage substance abuse and neurochemical decay. After the war, the myth of the Wehrmacht's mechanical superiority was carefully deconstructed by historians and doctors. The soldiers who conquered Western Europe in 1940 were not the genetically superior supermen of Nazi mythology. They were exhausted, sleep-deprived men running on a laboratory stimulant that destroyed their judgment, stripped them of natural empathy, and ultimately broke their minds. The story of Pervitin remains one of the darkest warnings in military history. It proves that when an ideology attempts to override human nature, it inevitably turns to manipulation, first of the truth and then of the human body itself. But no regime, no matter how ruthless, can command biology. The lightning war burned bright for a moment, but when the chemical fog cleared, all that remained was an army of broken minds, shivering in the ruins of the illusions they had been fed.